So we've had a reading from Luke's Gospel, which talks about how the Sadducees came to Jesus, second in line to come and poke holes at what Jesus was saying, to try and bring him down, to try and suggest that what he was doing wasn't right. And in this second encounter, the Sadducees came along and they asked Jesus a very legalistic question about a hypothetical situation about someone who had died childless and how their brothers had to then marry this woman and carry on, and who was married to her in the afterlife, and other such things, based very loosely on the teaching from Deuteronomy. The exact teaching, of course, was different from what they said, because that referred to not having a son as opposed to no children at all. Very patriarchal kind of idea, and that was kind of their agenda. It doesn't really matter what they thought or what they believed or how they viewed things. One of the things that characterises the Jewish sect known as the Sadducees is that they didn't believe in an afterlife. Somebody in the congregation just told me that that's why they were sad, you see. Methodist humour. So that's the situation. Jesus quotes back to them their own teaching, because they had a strict adherence to the literal interpretation of the first 5 books of what we call the Old Testament, as opposed to the oral tradition that the Pharisees brought to Jewish religious observance. Parts of the intelligentsia, parts of the elite, regarded for their strict adherence, as I mentioned. So they come to Jesus with this idea, and Jesus says to them, now look, Moses himself said something really important. God is the God of the living and the dead. There is no sense talking about what's going to happen in an afterlife, whatever that means. Because God is always, always, always with us, that his love always surrounds us. This is a central message. And it's such a difficult thing to try and unpack in worship, because it's a very complicated scheme. This life that we lead, the breathing we do, the circulation, the respiration, the everything that we do, that we think of as life, is just a phase. For those of us who have encountered God in our hearts, this is part of a journey which will never, ever end. God knows and loves all people, and always his love will be with us. The transition from not existing to being born and alive is fairly traumatic, and so too is it when we move from life, this life, to death. That's a different situation altogether. But what we need to understand and really appreciate in our hearts is that God is the God of the living and the dead. Those two states have names, but no actual real importance. God is always, always with us. And that confidence that is given through that knowledge of God's eternal love, always with us, is the central message of today, and the good news. Because for all people who understand that in their hearts, then there should fundamentally be peace and assurance, strength and confidence in God. Doesn't mean that we're going to lead a charged life, free of pain and suffering, doubt, hardship, sickness. These are things that happen in a physical world. But fundamentally, we should be people who are, in the words of that most wonderful song, grounded, firm and deep in the Saviour's love. Amen.